Let's go ahead and get started on time. First of all, good morning, everyone. Great to see you. I'm Bob Ramsey, your host again for our Economic Forecast Breakfast, brought to you by Royal Banks of Missouri. And we're at a new venue for the first time ever, and what a spectacular place. If you're like me, many of you may have not been to the factory previously. What a spectacular place. I can't wait to see some music and some other things in here. There's a tremendous venue, and we're so glad all you folks followed us here for today's event. A lot going on. You know, we have a lot of fun with looking at our projections from last year, our predictions, and to see how right or wrong we are this time around. And then, of course, we'll make our predictions for next year. The only one that we didn't bring up last year, being a sports guy, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the voice of the Billikens and do podcasting on Claves Online. But one of the sports stories that I completely missed on, an absolute whiff, in fact, I thought it was a waste of time, was the lawsuit against the Rams. The folks did an unbelievable job in defeating the Rams. I know we wanted the Rams folks pilloried and hung up in the town square. We didn't get that, but if you're like me, I go to the mailbox every day looking for my check. So we'll see how that works out. We got a number of speakers today, so we're going to try and get to this pretty quickly. Let me get our opening remarks and our real welcome from our friends at Royal Banks. Scott Sorrentino, he is the CFO at Royal Banks, and he'll officially get us started this morning. Scott?
Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 21st annual Economic Forecast Breakfast. Thank you very much for hosting us here today, Mr. Steinberg. As you know, Royal Banks is the official bank sponsor of the factory, and we've been so impressed with this development since its inception, as well as the district project throughout this whole complex. We had the opportunity to move this from the Ritz-Carlton, where we've had this in the past, and we jumped at the opportunity. As Bob mentioned, I have had the pleasure of attending an event here just a couple weeks ago, and it was outstanding. So I highly encourage you to join a show if you have the opportunity to. Michael Steinberg and his team at the Steinberg Group have delivered a true gem to the West County market, and we're pleased to welcome Michael as a special guest speaker this morning. Additionally, it's my pleasure to welcome back our outstanding panel of economic speakers. Regardless of the industry you work in, the unprecedented pandemic and the recovery has put a toll on the entire business community, whether it's inflation, labor shortages, changing to staffing models, work from home, the uncertainty caused by shutdowns, mask mandates, so on. We've all persevered through challenges and adapted to a new normal. And at this time more than ever, the perspective of each of our speakers this morning will help us as we navigate into 2022 and plan for the year ahead. I'd also like to recognize a couple of our Royal Banks of Missouri team members that are here this morning. As you may have heard earlier this year, we completed an acquisition of Saints Avenue Bank shares, and we're happy to welcome Chuck Like and Bill Forsyth and other members of the Saints Avenue team to the Royal team who are here with us this morning. The acquisition expanded our presence in St. Charles County with a business banking office at the streets of St. Charles, as well as 3 banking facilities up in Northeast Missouri. It also expanded our treasury, cash management expertise within the organization, and a private banking approach to serving family-owned private businesses of all shapes and sizes. The organization has been a great strategic fit for the Royal organization. I'd also like to thank our board of directors at the bank for sharing in the vision of our CEO, Mitch Baden, and our senior management team. They've been very supportive as we've reshaped the bank over the last couple of years. Specifically, I'd like to recognize our chairwoman, Linda Renner, Matt Renner, Steve Pessin, Ira Bergman, and all of the members of our board of directors. And specifically, a special thank you to Ricky Nix this morning, as his team at Butler's Pantry is handling all the catering for this event, and it's been outstanding. So thank you very much, Ricky. And on that note, I have one other special person to recognize. and that's Lisa Weeks. Where is Lisa this morning? There she is. She's out there waving her hand. Lisa handles all these events for the organization and does an outstanding job, whether it be board meetings, special events like this, client functions. She does an outstanding job, and we really appreciate her help. Thank you, Lisa. And in closing, as you can tell, we have a lot to be grateful for at Royal Banks of Missouri, but most of all, we're grateful for all the relationships in this room, from friends to business associates. We really appreciate you. We appreciate you coming out to this new venue and enjoying the opportunity to see the factory. And we'll wish you all a prosperous 2022. And so on that note, we'll go ahead. We've got a full agenda, so we'll keep this moving. I'd like to invite Ashley Gates to come up to the stage. And she's going to talk about our predictions from last year and how we did.
So every year on your tables, we'll have prediction sheets, and what we'll do is we'll have you write what your predictions are for the coming year. And if you guys can do that at some point today and then leave those predictions on the table, that would be great as well. So our first was gas prices. We predicted $2.34. Actual was $2.99. Prime rate, we predicted 3.61%, and the actual was 3.25%. Unemployment rate was predicted 6.01%, and it's actually only 4.2% in the U.S. and 3.7% in Missouri. Dow Jones prediction for the industrial average was 29,534, and the actual was 35,971. For the NASDAQ, predicted was 12,500, and actual was 15,630. And for the last prediction, it was, did we think a COVID vaccine would be distributed to the general public? The prediction was yes, and the actual, as we all know, is yes. Thank you. And don't forget to fill out your prediction sheets.
Thank you, Ashley. So let's get those predictions out and see if we can get those gas prices a little bit lower. Just a personal note from me. Thank you. Our next guest is our featured speaker today. I want to introduce you to Michael Steinberg. Michael is a founder and president of the Steinberg Group, a leader, visionary, and philanthropist. He's achieved unprecedented success in the commercial and real estate sector, has helped to create communities nationwide, contributing to hundreds of nonprofit organizations to the United States and Israel through his dedication to philanthropy. Michael and his family are dedicated to building a legacy of giving to create positive change and to inspire the next generation of philanthropists by sharing their time, money, and talent. This is his new place right here. Please welcome Michael Steinberg.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the factory. First, before I talk about the factory, the district, in this area, I want to thank the Green family, especially Tommy Green. Tommy was a mentor of mine, and I wouldn't be up here today without him. And so his blessed memory, I want everybody to recognize that Tommy is the reason I'm where I am today. So thank you, Tommy, as I look up, and thank you, Royal Banks, for being our partner. The factory was a vision of mine when I built the Chesterfield Commons across the street, and I had this crazy idea with Lou Sachs. He took me, I tried to put a Walmart by the mall, and he said, we don't want a Walmart by the mall. Go to the valley. And in 1993, in July, if everybody remembers, there was a little flood down here. And I was sitting at the bridge where the DoubleTree was, and I was looking out there, and somehow Lou Sachs shows up and says, look, the opportunity is down there. And I'm thinking, what opportunity? But I soon figured out there was an opportunity. And so by 1999, we opened the Walmart store, the Lowe's store, the Home Depot, and it was the first big box shopping center built in America. It's 2 miles long, 2.5 million square feet. And about 6 years ago, I was having breakfast in Las Vegas at our booth at the ICSC, and I walk in. I usually try to get there. It's 8 o'clock. I usually try to get there at 7:45 because it takes no talent to show up on time. And so I'm there, and there's a guy named Billy and Bobby Taubman, mall developers that had built this outlet mall. And I came to the grand opening, and I was friends with them, and they said, "Could we see you?" I said, "Sure, what do we want to talk about?" "Well, could you come to our booth?" I said, "Okay." I'm thinking, what could you say? "We want to sell you the outlet center." And I looked at him and I said, "You want to sell me the outlet center? You're losing to everybody, to Simon." No, we're gonna work with you." So after about a year of negotiations, we ended up buying this shopping center that you're at today. That was the outlets, the Taubman outlets. And they said, "Well, what's your vision?" And I looked at them and I said, "I'm not sure I have a vision yet. Let me think about it." So I started flying around the country and thought, there's nothing like this opportunity in the United States where you have 40 acres, 400,000 square feet of vacant piece of land. We can have a complete whiteboard to whatever we want to do. And I thought, there's a lack of entertainment in St. Louis, in Western the county. So I said, okay. So I called a friend of mine named Steve Shankman, and I said, "Steve, what about putting a music venue out in Chesterfield?" And the first thing, and I've known Steve forever, and he said, "Well, that's a dumb idea." I said, "Oh, perfect. I'm glad you think so." I said, "I'm going to do it." And so I flew around the country looking at music venues, and fortuitously, Brian Karp, who's here somewhere today, shows up in my office and says, "I'm moving back to St. Louis." And I said, "What did you do, Brian?" I know his mother. "Well, I'm in the music business." I said, "Perfect." And so I said, this is God's way of telling me this is what we're going to do. So we started thinking about it, and we started working on this concept, and we wanted to be different than everyone else. We wanted to have the flexibility. We wanted a small venue. We wanted to have events in this place, et cetera, et cetera. Then lucky Top Golf moved in. Then we have Main Event, and we built the factory. The factory has a lot of different ways we can use it for music, comedy, events like this, weddings, et cetera. And we're really proud of what we accomplished here. This is a great team effort. It was supposed to be an industrial look. If you haven't been here for a concert or a comedy series or whatever, I'm more proud of the sound and lights and ingress, egress, free parking, et cetera, that comes with this. And we're really, really proud of what we've accomplished so far. But the district itself is a great opportunity too. The vision is entertainment, play, eat, rock. It's beyond your expectation. So how do we exceed your expectation? And right now, we are moving forward. We have Main Event that's open. You know, obviously, Top Golf is open. This is open. And we just made a deal to tear down the Polo, and we're going to put 6 restaurants. We're going to have a 750-seat area out there to have gathering. We're not sure what we're going to call it yet. I think the spot, the place, the gathering. I'm not sure what we're going to call it. But we're going to put that there and really turn this into something exciting. We have Pickleball coming, a group out of Indianapolis. We have, as I said, 5 or 6 restaurants that are pretty close to signing up. We have a lot of different opportunities. I just opened an art gallery. I have a problem collecting art. I have about 3,000 pieces that were sitting up in my office building on the floor, and everybody in my office said, "What are we going to do?" And what happened was I sold the building to Bob Clark of Clayco, who's my next-door neighbor, and he says, "Well, you got till November 14th to get it out of there." So I figured, I got vacant space, so I'll open a gallery. So if anybody has time, down the road, we have the gallery, and I'm pretty proud of that. But notwithstanding that, you know, we're happy to be in Chesterfield. We're really proud of what we've accomplished. I did the Commons. We bought the Chesterfield Mall, and people say to me all the time, "What are you going to do with the mall?" I have no idea. I'm, you know, if anybody has any suggestions, it's like predictions. Could you write them down and send them to me? But we're working with the city to come up with some public finance to tear the mall down. And really what my vision is, in all seriousness, is to create a downtown similar to Clayton, but nicer, like Cherry Creek. You know, we have a good whiteboard. You know, there's a project in Austin called The Domain. It's probably one of the nicest mixed-use projects I've seen. So our vision is to put 400,000 or 500,000 square feet of unique retail. We have a grocery store interested, build 3,000 or 4,000 apartments, 1 million square feet of offices, a park, a lot of amenities, so it's, people can walk to where they want to go. So we're really kind of excited about that. Real estate. Let's move on because I was told I only had 5 minutes. So I want to keep the schedule because I could talk for a long time. Real estate's an interesting business. I've been doing this since 1976. So I've seen a lot of ups and downs in the cycles. I remember in 1979 when the President of the United States was a guy from Georgia, and I remember the prime rate every day would go up 0.5 point. And I remember in 1980, and people don't remember this, the prime rate was 21.5. President Carter did a great job of inflation at that point. And I was thinking to myself, here we go again. And I'm not picking sides in the political party at all. I'm straight down. I don't really like most politicians, so I'm sure if you're a politician, I apologize. But I am concerned by what's going on. There's a lot. I majored in economics at Arizona State, thought I was smart. I remember there was the inelasticity. Salt was inelastic. Gasoline was inelastic. That's not what's going to happen here. And I really think that we're headed for some price increases, some little tough times. The world's a much closer place. I'm worried about what Russia's going to do, what China's going to do. Those are factors that we can't even conceive of what could happen. So real estate's become a commodity, and I worry about that. People are trading real estate like it's a commodity. It's not a commodity. This is a long-term investment, and I've always taken that approach. And I worry today that people, a lot of the brokers, a lot of the investors are thinking that they can just trade it whenever they want. And so I think in the next year you will see interest rates go up, which is not a bad thing. But the problem in the retail, our segment is the rents are fixed and the construction costs keep going up, and I worry about that. And not only the construction costs, but the time delays. We're building a Petco in Quincy, Illinois, and we can't get HVAC equipment. We can't get computer equipment. And so we're behind the 8 ball, and every day that you don't have a store open, I am concerned because it's costing us time, energy, and money. So I really don't know what the answer is, but I am cautiously optimistic. I always think that the glass isn't half full or half empty. I'm just glad there's water in it. And so I'm just trying to be very sensitive of what it is that I'm doing. If I were you, I'd fix as many interest rates as you can. Royal Banks is a great partner, and I've been talking to them about extending loans and fixing rates because I do believe rates are going up. Us in the retail business when I started, we were the king. Retail was the king, all the malls. So I was thinking about this. 5 years ago, there were 1,300 malls. Today, there's less than 500. And everybody says, oh, that's terrible. But not really, because we in the strip center business are benefiting because they're all moving out of the malls, coming to our strip centers. So the bankruptcies are mostly over because the people that have survived COVID and everything are doing well. So I want to thank everyone for coming. We're proud of this. Come back for a concert. And if I can help you in any way, my door is always open. You can call before 10 and after 5 in the morning. Thank you.
In my world of sports, the great players, one of the things that's common is vision. The great ones, point guards, quarterbacks, what have you. The one thing that is common among them all is vision. When Michael was talking about the flood here, I guess we'd be underwater right now, and he was, up at the bridge, and his partner talked about the opportunity and the vision and what they saw. I'm glad it was Michael, not me. I would have said, yeah, boat rental, bait and tackle, perfect. Let's open one up right now. That's why the Michael Steinbergs are important to us. And so let's get on with our program. Right now I want to welcome a good friend of mine. We've known each other a very long time. Bob Hardcastle's been in the investment industry for over 57 years, tons of awards in the field. He's published 5 books, an annual supporter of the St. Louis Chapter, Alzheimer's Association, Variety Club, tons of charitable work. He's been inducted into the St. Louis Amateur Baseball Hall of Fame and the St. Louis Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. I guess he's our Sandy Koufax. He's interviewed such public figures as General Arnold Schwarzkopf, attorney generals, business people, and you hear a lot of these interviews on his long time show, 35 years, St. Louis Money Talk Radio, and you can hear it every Sunday morning on 5:50 a.m. and Monday through Friday on the Market Wrap-Up on the Fox 2 simulcast at 6:07 every evening. Please welcome my buddy, Bob Hardcastle. Let's get to our next guest. I want to welcome a guy who's with us every year and does marvelous work, Ron Amlin. For 30 years, Ron's been a nationally recognized entrepreneur, author, publisher, and speaker. He's the owner and president of SBM, publisher of the St. Louis Small Business Monthly, and the host of the St. Louis Business Expo and Business Growth Workshop. Ron is the author of 2 books, Burst, a step-by-step roadmap of growing your small business, and Business Breakthroughs, St. Louis style. Please welcome Ron Amlin. Ron?
Thank you very much. So I'm excited to be here today talking about the impact of business and kind of the state of small business as we head into the upcoming years. And you know, the last few years have been really interesting for businesses of all sizes. And it seems like depending on your industry, you've either had the greatest year you've ever had or you've had the most god-awful year you've ever had. So everybody is kind of wondering, okay, so now where are we headed as we head into 2022? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit because despite some positives in the economy, there are some pessimism when it comes to businesses. So we're going to talk 2022, and we're going to first take a look at the 5 biggest challenges that businesses are going to face, and then we'll end up talking a little bit about where we think we're headed next year. And you know, and when you think about this time of year, typically businesses will do their strategic plans for the next year. And in any given year, if you're a business who has their culture kind of set up really well and you have your fundamentals of business down, and you know, moving into the next year isn't that big a deal. But I really think that this year is different because there are some factors that are in play that we haven't seen for many years. So I think it's more important than ever for businesses to really have a good strategic plan going into the next year. And if you're a service provider, by the way, and you can solve any of these challenges that businesses face, you'll be worth your weight in gold. So let's talk about these challenges that are facing businesses next year. Now, the first challenge is inflation. Now, this is a photo of a swear jar. And I have 2 teenagers in my house, so we utilize the swear jar a lot. And rumor has it that yours truly has donated a lot to this jar during the last year watching some Mizzou athletic events. And I'm not going to confirm or deny that. But and I was going to bring that jar here and set it up. And then any of the speakers today who mentioned the word inflation, we were going to put $1 in. Because when it comes to business, inflation is definitely a dirty word. And you can see the inflation through the years, and the middle number is the rate of inflation. The one to the right is the percent change from the year before. And as you can see, we really haven't had to deal with inflation for decades. I mean, you have to go to the 70s and the 80s, which you see those numbers are just god-awful. And I think it's, for someone like me who's been in business for 16 years, who's owned a business for 16 years, I've never had to deal with this. And so I think it's important for folks like us to find individuals who've been through this before and try to gain some knowledge from them and how they dealt with it. And so I'm going to help you find those folks right now. First, you want to look for someone who's used a rotary phone before. That's the first thing you want to. And then besides that, you want to find someone who's gone at least a week without taking a photo of themselves. If they meet those two criteria, they might be able to help you. But I know one thing for sure is inflation is not going away. I mean, it's here to stay. I mean, it doesn't matter what cassette tape we put in the boom box, and Bob was nice enough to loan me his boom box because I'm way too young to have ever had anything like that, maybe. But it bothers me that when I see media reports about inflation, it's not that big a deal, and I see presidential spokespeople who kind of poo-poo the idea of inflation being a big deal, because for businesses, inflation is a big deal. And by the way, if you don't know the reference to that photo, you'll have to ask someone old, and they can tell you. I have an 18-year-old at home, and most of the things he says, I have no clue what he's talking about, so you know what I feel like on a normal basis. But let's look at the impact of inflation on a business, and let's look at the financials of a business, and we'll put it kind of in a funnel. Let's say you own this small business, you did $1 million last year, and then you had your salaries and benefits and your cost of goods sold and your expenses, and what trickles out at the bottom is your profit before tax. And so let's say in this example you were 7%, $70,000. The average profit's 5%, depending on your business, your industry. So you did pretty well. Okay, so let's take a look now at inflation on that business. Let's say that nationwide inflation is 6.8%, but in the Midwest it's closer to 7.5%. So let's say 7%. You do your million again in 2022, but your salaries, you're going to add 5% to the employees for salaries, and that doesn't even keep up with inflation, but I'm trying to be conservative here. Your benefits, you add 5%. My company, our benefits went up 6.5%, so again, we're being conservative. Your cost of goods sold going up 7%, and if you're in any kind of transportation business and you're dealing with energy and gasoline, it's going to be probably higher than that. Your expenses up 7%. So doing the same amount of business as the year before, your profit has now gone from $70,000 to a little under $13,000. And so now you're in a position where if you have a bad month or a bad quarter, you're in some trouble. So, and for a lot of businesses, because of supply issues, just because of the economy in general, they may not be able to do the business that they did last year. So the impact of inflation is huge and can't be underestimated. I mean, even the Dollar Tree, instead of everything's $1, now everything's $1.25. I mean, is nothing sacred anymore? So every business has been impacted by inflation. So how do you deal with inflation going into the new year? Well, you have to raise your prices. For businesses, you have to raise your prices. You don't really have a choice. And I talked to two restaurant owners last week, and for the last 3 months, these restaurant owners have been taking these supply side increases on themselves. And just like that funnel, their profits are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And they both told me in the next 2 weeks they're releasing new menus and they are going to have price increases. So you got to do that. The other thing you can do is become more efficient. Use technology to do more with less. Try to be more efficient with your folks. If you're in an industry where you have fixed pricing, you're just screwed. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, you really have to focus on your efficiency and doing more than less, because inflation is really, really difficult for you. And there's a lot in the healthcare industry that your prices are fixed, and that's difficult. So inflation is the first challenge that businesses are going to face next year, and they have to have a strategic plan to get through those. The other is number two is retaining employees. And when we talk about employees, hiring always gets the media attention, and folks like to talk about how hard it is to hire folks, and it is. But the key to this hiring dilemma we have right now is really to retain your employees. And there has to be a strategy to do that. You really have to think about how you can do that. Years ago, my wife and I bought a property in North County, and it had a huge backyard, and the yard had this huge fence around it. And the fence posts and this fence were rotting from the bottom out, so they were all either falling over or leaning over. And I'm not a very handy person, but my father-in-law is. He came over, he showed me how to take out the post and take out the concrete and concrete them in, make the new posts look really nice. And the first one I did, it took me an hour to do one. And so every year I would continue to do more and more. Well, 5 years later, I could do 10 posts in an hour. I mean, I became really efficient at how I could get those posts in and set up that fence. And the same is true in business. When we have employees who've been with us for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, I mean, they become really good and really efficient at what they do. And so we need to make sure now more than ever, maybe 10 years ago it wasn't that big a deal, but now more than ever, we need to make sure we keep those people, because that employee has been with you for 10 years. You're going to have to hire 5 people to be as efficient and to be as good as that one employee. So we really have to work on that, and there has to be a strategy behind it, and we'll talk about that a little bit. You know, Malcolm Gladwell says to be really good at something, you have to practice it for 10,000 hours, and that's about 4 or 5 years for an employee. So again, it's really critical that you retain those employees. And number 3 challenge is certainly hiring, and we all know about that. My company brought in a speaker about 12 years ago, an HR expert from Minnesota, and she was talking about hiring. And 12 years ago, unemployment was like 10%, and she was coming in to speak to a group of business owners. And before she got on stage, she said, you know, it's ironic that I'm here talking about how unemployment is so high and how people can't find jobs, because in 10 to 15 years, it's going to be the total opposite. You're not going to be able to find an employee. And she gave all these demographic reasons for that, and she's right, and we're living that right now. And so it's kind of a perfect storm, this hiring challenge we have today, and it's really, you know, led by the labor participation rate. It's pretty amazing that individuals 18 to retirement in that working age, almost 40% just choose not to work. And that's interesting. Ages 16 to 24 has the lowest participation rate, which is really interesting. Baby boomers continue to retire. You know, and it's no secret that, you know, baby boomers had less kids on average than their parents, and millennials are now having less than some of the baby boomers. Millennials will inherit projected $68 trillion by the year 2030, and trust me, that is not going to make them want to go work for you. And prime-age men, you know, are choosing not to work or work part-time. And then you have the COVID. You know, the COVID made a lot of people take a look at their lives and what they were doing and try to figure out if they really wanted to continue doing that. So again, this is something that's not going away, and it's going to take some strategy to solve the problem. So what can we do? Well, we have to pay better. There's no question about it. And it's difficult for small businesses. I, as a small business owner, can't pay what MasterCard or Anheuser-Busch pays, but I've got to up my game, and I've got to get better at it. We have to invest in employer branding. I mean, right now our websites are all dedicated to our current customers or our prospects, trying to pull them in. And I think we also have to use those websites to say why we are great employers for our next employees. We need to use our websites to say, hey, you know, that you need to come work for us because this is the culture we have, and this is what we can do for you. We need to create a all-hands-on-deck philosophy when it comes to recruiting. Recruiting used to be the hiring director's problem or the hiring manager's problem, and I think all employees have to get involved in recruiting. And when we find good employees, we need to find that person's cousin, their brother, their sister. I know Royal Banks does a great job of this. They hire brothers and sisters, and when they find out that someone's a great employee, we know that great people hang out with great people, so their friends, their family. So we all have to get involved in recruiting. All the employees, we have to build a bench of people that we can utilize. And we have to do good. That's another thing, you know, especially for millennials. They want to work for a company that is really helping the community, and so we got to make sure we do that. We got to make sure we show career paths for employees. Employees want 2 things out of work. They want to, one, know they matter, and 2, they want to know they make a difference. And if you, as an employer, can check those 2 boxes off, you'll never have to worry about retaining your employees. You'll just never have to worry about it. So that's another issue, challenge facing businesses next year. Number 4 challenge is COVID. I mean, where is it going? Are we looking at more mandates and shutdowns? Because if we are, those industries that were hit the hardest, you know, the retail, the restaurants, the hospitality, they'll be impacted. And they'll not only be impacted this time, they'll be dealing with inflation on top of that. I talked to a dentist about a month ago who still is not seeing the amount of patients he saw before COVID. So there's still people who are not comfortable enough going to the dentist still. So there's still industries that are battling back. And so where is COVID? I mean, I personally think we're in the fourth quarter and we're kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but I could be wrong. And so that's a big challenge for businesses. Final challenge we're going to talk about today is technology and security. And we talk about this, I talk about this here every single year I'm up on this podium because it's that important for businesses. You know, ransomware is something that's not going away, and it's even getting worse now because you have so many employees working from home and working remotely. So if you're a business owner and you haven't thought of this scenario of going into the office and not being able to get any of the information off of your server or servers, then you need to go to the office right now and figure that out, because it's something that could impact you and could really damage your business. So those are the biggest challenges facing businesses next year. So let's take a look at the overall outlook. You know, despite the positives in the economy, and there are positives in the economy, and GDP is up, retail sales are up, unemployment's down. I mean, there are some positives in the economy. Business owners are still pessimistic going into the next year because of those challenges that I just talked about. There's a feeling that growth will be slower in 2021, and growth has been halfway decent this year. And we're not thinking of a recession or anything close to that, but just slower than 21. There is a feeling inflation will lower throughout 2022 once we get particularly the supply issues kind of better under control. There's a feeling retail sales will slow, but currently retail sales third quarter was really high, so that's understandable that would happen. Cash flow will certainly be tighter. Inflation will make that almost certain for a lot of businesses. But the bottom line is that business owners are pessimistic about the upcoming year, but there is a feeling that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I know a lot of business owners feel that if we can get through 2022, that 2023 and 2024 could be very, very good years. And so, again, this has been a difficult few years for small business. A lot of small businesses have kind of bore the brunt of COVID. And again, there's a feeling that we're in the fourth quarter and the light is at the end of the tunnel, and we see it and we're moving towards it. And the next few years should be much better. I thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dr. William R. Emmons. He is the lead economist in the Banking Supervision Division at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. He's been there 27 years. He speaks and writes frequently about the banking and financial markets. He's president of the St. Louis chapter of the National Association for Business Economics, PhD in finance from the J.L. Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern, and a bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Illinois. Please welcome to the podium Dr. William R. Emmons. Bill.
Thank you, Bob. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the economy and monetary policy today, but I can't, because the FOMC, the policymaking body for the Fed, is meeting today and tomorrow in Washington, D.C., and so we are under our blackout policy. So instead, I'm going to talk about some longer-term issues which are very relevant for thinking about the economy. Some of these themes have been touched upon. I will still remind you, though, these are my own views, not necessarily those of anybody at the St. Louis Fed or in the Fed system generally. So I'm going to talk about population growth, why it matters nationally for our region, and why it's at risk, and what I think we can and should do about it. So why does population growth matter from a business, from an economic standpoint? Well, 40% of U.S. economic growth comes from population growth. I'll show you the picture of that. You don't think about it that way, but that's part of the number of that we talk about. Economic growth is population growth. Number two, population aging and the resulting slowdown of population growth, which has been underway for a long time, slows GDP growth. That undermines fiscal sustainability, the ability of the federal government and increasingly lots of private businesses to service the debt that they've accumulated. And number three, it's a pocketbook issue. In the long run, private wealth and I'll show you a picture of this, including the stock market, tracks GDP over time fairly closely. And as I just said, GDP growth depends on population growth. So it really does matter sustaining some amount of population growth. Why is it at risk in St. Louis and nationwide? Well, we in the Midwest have been aware of this for a long, long time. Midwest population growth is slowing faster than it is nationwide. There are parts of our region that are losing population. I'll show you a map of that. And COVID has exacerbated each of the key drivers of population growth, and I'll show you this. The birth rate was already declining. It has plunged in recent months. The death rate was rising because of our aging population and other factors, and not surprisingly, that also has surged. And immigration, which for a long, long time, actually for the history of our country, but even in recent decades, immigration has been a major driver of population growth, and that basically came to a halt during the acute phase of COVID, and even now is only slowly coming back. We are going to receive some families from Afghanistan. This is the kind of inflow to our region that we need to continue to rejuvenate and continue growth. And then I'll conclude with a few thoughts on what we individually and collectively can and I think should do about these questions. So the first statement I made is that 40% of U.S. economic growth is population growth. So this is a way to break down this is the cumulative growth of U.S. GDP since 1900. The orange portion of it there is how much is due to working more efficiently, investing and working more efficiently. That's productivity growth. And the blue is the simple contribution of more people in our economy, increasing the labor force. So it's 40%. Aging of the population, which is happening, of course, around the globe, does have consequences. This is a picture of federal government debt relative to GDP, again, going back from 1900. And you can see some peaks, for example, that we borrowed a lot of money for World War I. We borrowed a lot more for World War II, up to the point of having 100% of government debt relative to GDP, which then, for most of our adult lives, was the peak, that 100% in World War II. It only then started to rise again with the financial crisis and COVID, and we're now back at that 100% level. And looking forward, it's quite likely that this curve is going to rise, and you can see that that's an exponential type growth. The red line is what will happen to government debt relative to GDP under existing assumptions about population growth, which is slowing, and productivity growth. The blue dashed line is what happens if our political leaders actually don't follow through on all of these promises to raise taxes in the future, cut spending in the future, which is the way both parties tend to write their bills. Actually, it doesn't make much difference, does it? Both the red curve and the blue curve are exploding. So this is the issue, that we actually do not have a credible plan to get our spending under control. Point here is population aging and slower growth of population is one of the main forces. So in the sense that if we could get more population growth, it would at least contribute to getting those curves flattened out. Of course, the political decisions are going to be even more important. Now, what about this idea that it's really economic growth, GDP, and 40% of that is population growth? That's what drives wealth. And here's a picture. This now starts just after World War II, and the red line is the household net worth. So this is all of the value of assets minus liabilities for the household sector. This also throws in the nonprofit sector. That's the red line. And the blue line is just nominal GDP, that is before we adjust it for inflation. And it's almost a perfect correlation. In recent times, the red line has been running faster. And so in one sense, it's probably outrun GDP, probably temporarily. So I'm indicating there with that dashed line, it's probably a reasonable forecast. is that the red line will come back to the blue trajectory. And again, underlying the slope of that blue line is population growth, one of the major drivers. And so as population growth slows, the blue line flattens, which makes the, if there is this sort of longer-term correction of private wealth toward that blue line, makes that even greater. Even more specifically, here's the S&P 500 from 1921 to the present. And yes, the stock market, as Bob said, is much, much more volatile than things like economic growth. But you can, I think, see that it tracks that GDP over long periods, decades or multiple decades. And again, the S&P 500 looks pretty high relative to that blue line trend, and so probably you would expect something of a convergence back toward the blue line. And again, population growth is what's one of the things dictating the slope of that blue line. So let's look locally. This is a map of the counties, and I've centered it on St. Louis, picking up Missouri and Illinois. The higher population counties are the dark blue. Those have over 100,000 up to 1 million. Then the light blue are in the 10,000 to 100,000, and then the very light shading are very low population counties, less than 10,000. So if I asked you, where do you think population pressures, that is growth decline, is most severe, you'd probably say, well, I think those low population counties are probably going to be losing a lot of their population, and that's true. Maybe it's not quite as clear for the middle and higher population counties. So now I'm going to put in for each county a green dot if the population increased in the 10 years up, from 2010 to 20, and a red dot if the population decreased. Looks like we got a case of the measles. In Missouri, 2/3 of counties lost population between the 2010 and 2020 censuses. You can see that as we expected, those very low population counties in the north and the south part of the state lost population, but also some of our larger, for example, St. Louis County and St. Louis City lost population. The gainers were more the suburban and the exurban counties around St. Louis and Kansas City, Columbia, Springfield, Joplin, the Lake of the Ozarks region. If you look at the Illinois side, I don't have the whole state on there, there are 102 counties in Illinois, all but 6 lost populations in the last 10 years. Now, Illinois is kind of an extreme example, but this is illustrative of the pressures in the Midwest. So here are, in graphical terms, these are percent changes year over year. Going back from 1990, you can see the red is our region, the west central set of states. Missouri is blue there, it's one of those states. You can see this slow decline in the growth rates of population. Then for Illinois, the black dashed line, as you probably know, Illinois has been losing population at an increasingly rapid clip for some time. And then the green is the set of states, the East North Central Census Division that includes Illinois, which is also now declining in population. Some of the metro areas in our region, Indianapolis is still growing 1% a year, faster than the national average. Kansas City also is growing. These are smoothed out a little bit, and the bump there is around the census years. Cincinnati, Louisville, Memphis, all growing a little bit faster than us. Milwaukee very close, and you can see now St. Louis is basically flat, and Chicago is losing population. This is for the whole metro areas, I should say. And then I want to look at those drivers of population growth. Remember, the birth rate minus the death rate plus net immigration. So this is going back from the 1970s forward. This is every month, how many live births were there in the United States? And you can see the numbers, 300,000, 350, peaking around at the time of the financial crisis. And there was just basically some demographic math involved, but I think that the financial crisis did have an effect. It changed people's outlooks, probably made people a little bit less confident about starting a family, or at least waiting a little bit more. So there was a downturn in the raw number of births, and then at the very end, it has plunged, and I'll zoom in here in just a second to show you that. The blue line is deaths. That's going up because we have a growing population, but we have an aging population, so more people are dying. We also have things like the opioid epidemic, which are contributing to deaths. And as you can see at the end, that surges. Here's a little bit more of a close-up look, and you can see in April of last year, we had more deaths than births. And as far as I know, that's the first time since probably colonial times when in the United States we had more deaths than births in a month. And it happened again another 4 months at the end of last year, beginning of this year. So immigration is the third piece. The blue line in this picture now is births minus deaths, what's called natural increase. Red is the total change in resident population. These are each month. And so the difference is net immigration, the number of people coming into the country minus the number of people coming out. And yes, this includes documented and undocumented. The Census Division counts everyone, or each census look at the population. We had a big increase in immigration in the 90s, 2000s. It made a huge difference in keeping our population growing. You can see those tailing off, both the natural increase and immigration, resulting in a slowing of our population growth. Again, zoom in a little bit, and you can see in recent months, population has been growing at its slowest rate in, as I say, probably since colonial times. Of course, a big part of that is COVID. If you follow these numbers, we're probably in the next day or two, we're going to hit 800,000 deaths from COVID. That's probably an undercount, and there are also related deaths, deaths of despair related to COVID. We have not been hit the hardest of any region, but we certainly have been hit hard. These circles represent the number of people whose death has been attributed to COVID-19. So, summing it up, population growth matters. It drives economic growth, it drives private wealth accumulation in the long run. And we knew even before COVID that population was growing, slowing rather, in the US and especially in the Midwest. COVID has exacerbated each of these individual drivers. So, is there anything we can or should do about it? I would say yes. And the example I gave, we need to actively support immigration into St. Louis, into the United States generally. My wife, for example, is very excited to volunteer to help settle an Afghan family in St. Louis. And that's something we individually can do, and support policies that are favorable to immigration. Secondly, I think we need to, this period has illustrated, we need to think more seriously about public health. Not just pandemics, but in general, taking care of each other, providing support systems to help people survive and thrive. And that includes both physical health, but also mental health. You might have seen the article, or actually from the Surgeon General last week released a report. There's a mental health crisis among young people today, not least because of the impacts of the financial crisis and now COVID, and all the pressures Ron and others have talked about. So I think public health, mental health is something that we need to get behind to protect and extend life. And increasingly, with work being more flexible, more remote work, we as a region need to invest in the quality of life to attract and to retain people who want to live here. So the quality of life, I think, is going to be a huge, and I mean, the venue we're sitting in today, is an example. It's quality of life issues that are going to be a huge differentiator in which of our regions are able to attract young and growing families. So with that, we'll say, I will, for those of you interested, I have a video cast that will be out on Friday commenting on the FOMC meeting. You can get that on the internet. Just Google Take 5 with Bill Emmons. And I also talk to Bob on his program occasionally, so I'd be eager to talk more about the economy. Just can't do it today. All right, thanks.
Where is Lisa? Lisa, I'm guessing we're out of time for questions? Yes. Well, then let me please ask Steve Silver, Senior Vice President, Senior Leader at Royal Banks, to come up to wrap up our, there he is. All right, got some exciting fun and surprises for everyone. Take it away, Steve.
All right. First, thanks to everyone for being here. Again, thanks to Lisa Weeks for putting this on, and Michael Steinberg for providing this great venue. We're going to have a drawing for some door prizes, but these slides that were presented today can be found on our website, royalbanksandmo.com, royalbanksandmo.com, and that should be available in the next few days. So with that, Bob, would you like to help me with some door prizes? We have several tickets for this venue. Our first winner, Cindy Blake, Youth Bridge Community Foundation. She's the winner of some tickets to Green Street Bluegrass, which is here December 30th. Is she here?
Oh, there she is.
Okay. Here, draw one more.
Another one. I'm looking, reaching, shuffling.
All right. Oh, Steve Silver. No, let's see. This is Mark Schroeder, or Schroepter? That's it. You just won tickets to Kip Moore, February 25th, country artist.
More?
We got more. This is for tickets to Randy Hauser here at the factory, February 19th. And Brian Pultman, Correct Capital. Continuing with the music theme, we have some Beats Studio Buds. Oh, Lynn Wallace. Wallace Energy. And our last gift, some AirPods, Stephen McGough, Synergy. See him? Okay. And again, we'd like to thank everyone for coming. Again, thanks to Michael Steinberg for the great venue he provided here. I'd also like to remind you that I'd like to thank all our constituents here in the audience, our directors, employees, clients, referral sources. Appreciate everything you do for the bank. If you're in need of banking services, please feel free to contact any of our team members. And again, thank you and have a great day.
Well done.